Hello, hello. Happy Thursday. Welcome to yet another episode of Trash the Game Plan podcast. I'm your host, Maddie Schmidt. Today's episode is going to be a good one, so I'm just going to cut right to the chase and tell you what's up. We are going to be joined by one of the best college football writers in the entire country. That's right. I got Andy Staples on the podcast today. He's a college football writer for The Athletic. He's a University of Florida grad, and he also loves food and he likes to exercise. So I thought I had a lot in common with him. Thought I'd get him on the podcast. We're going to talk all things college football. A lot went on this past weekend, and we've got the game of the season this upcoming Saturday, Georgia and Tennessee. So get ready for a ton of college football talk in today's episode. Then I am going to chat about a non sports related topic, something pretty serious, actually. And it made me the woman I am today. We are going to talk about eating disorders. Nope, it's not a topic for everyone. So if that's not for you or you don't want any serious non sports related conversations, then feel free to just stop listening after my conversation with Andy because that's going to come up right after. All right, let's get to it with Andy Staples joining the podcast. Welcome to Trash the Game Plan, Andy. It's awesome to have you on today. How are you?
I am wonderful, wonderful, very happy. I love the whole theme of this podcast because I think, especially in this business, everybody has been in your shoes at one point or another. And I just remember when I was about to graduate from college and right after I graduated from college, I actually met my wife and in that period. And she's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I have a college degree and no full-time job. So you want to go out?"
As weird as it sounds,
She had some faith. So
yeah, as weird as it sounds, that's good to hear because I was like, well, I went to college, went to a top 5 university, and here I am with
that's right.
no job.
Well, you're doing it right because you're reaching out to the big guns like Mike Golick Jr. and listen, that's like the new godfather of podcasting. So that's a
Well,
good
thank
start.
you. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. So, you're a college football writer for The Athletic. Didn't start there, obviously, but I was doing some research and was reading your bio at The Athletic. It said you also cover all barbecue related issues. First off, I didn't know barbecue had issues.
Oh, it's so many
Second,
issues.
oh my gosh. Second, what does that mean?
It just means I eat barbecue when I'm on the road and file reports back. And I did write more about food when I was at Sports Illustrated, but now it's I didn't want that to be a required part of the job because it's one thing when you write about sports, when you cover sports, you can't be a fan. So like you can't be a fan of any particular team, and it sort of takes a little joy out of it. You don't get to have some of those moments. And I don't want that to happen with food because I think about these like serious food critics, like the food critics at the New York Times or at GQ. And I'm like, how big of fans of food are they really? Because they have to be so critical and they're looking for the best of the best. Can they just enjoy Waffle House every once in a while? And so I was like, I don't know if I want the food stuff to be that much a part of it where I'm getting too critical. But I am kind of a barbecue snob. It just I've eaten so much good barbecue. I've been really lucky to go to some good places on the road. We here in Florida are not as lucky as some people in other states, but it's still my favorite food group. I cook it at home, not nearly as well as the people I see on the road. But yeah, no, it's funny because when Twitter got big, I'm showing my age here. But when I first started tweeting, I was in my early 30s at that time, this would have been like 2008, 2009. The food stuff is what helped develop an audience for me there because people would really get serious in their arguments. Like the Kansas City people get really mad when you say your sauce sucks and you shouldn't drown the meat in it because you're acting like you don't know how to cook the meat when in fact you do, but you're drowning it in your disgusting sauce. So stop doing that. And like Kansas City people take that very personally.
So, where have you had the best barbecue?
Well, it's you got to go by meat. So like the best brisket I've ever had is
Okay.
Franklin in Austin. My favorite ribs are at Archibald's in Northport, Alabama, which is a suburban Tuscaloosa, basically. Um, the best whole hog would either be the original Scott's Barbecue in Hemingway, South Carolina. Sweatman's in Holly Hill, South Carolina is like a buffet. It's only open 2 days a week. They cook like a bunch of hogs and then just every piece of it gets put on the buffet. And then there's the Skylight Inn in Aden, North Carolina, which is just it's incredible. It's one of the like oldest places in the country in terms of just great barbecue. And they do whole hogs, and they've got this cutting board when you walk in, and you think like this giant butcher block. It's probably like a foot thick, but it's got a bowl carved into it essentially. Not because they did that, because the action of the cleavers on the meat over the years has made it concave. And then they're also using the pork fat to do the little hoe cakes that they make, the little bread. And so if you really want to just go to heaven and get to stay on earth, you go to the Skylight Inn and you take two of those little cakes and you put some of that pork in between them and you just eat it. And it's about as close as you're going to get.
You're making me hungry. You're at Florida Gate. You've covered the Gators. You're a Gator alum. Is
Mm-hmm.
there any good barbecue in Gainesville, Florida?
Okay, so this is going to make people mad, but there's a place people always say, and I will say I can see the propane tank from the road, so I know it's not elite. So I'm not even going to mention names there. But unfortunately, the best barbecue in Gainesville is a chain out of Orlando, and that's Four Rivers. And I went to the original Four Rivers before there were any other locations, and barbecue people get really mad when people expand. They don't like the idea of chain barbecue because there's something about it being your place. And if somebody in another city can go, then it's not really your place. But if I did a blind taste test of all the barbecue spots in Gainesville, Four Rivers would win. And it's a testament to John Rivers, the guy who founded it. Gainesville also has its own chain barbecue that started in Gainesville. Everybody knows Sonny's. And listen, when I was a broke college kid, I had some great meals at Sonny's, but nobody's putting that in the elite barbecue category. But Four Rivers, for a chain, does a really good job. And so I think people, if they get over the idea that there's, 4 in Orlando now or 5 in Orlando and some in Tampa and 1 in Tallahassee and another 1 in Jacksonville, it's really good.
I might get a little hate for this. I have had Four Rivers once, but I did get takeout and it wasn't
Oh,
fabulous. So
uh-oh. What'd you order? That's the key. That's the question.
I don't remember. We got a smorgasbord, but I
Huh?
think bringing it home was a mistake.
Yeah, barbecue is one of those you kind of have to eat on site. And I would
Yeah.
say, I always tell people don't eat it for dinner either. Just eat it for lunch because it takes forever to cook and they're
Mhm.
planning to serve it to you at lunch. If you're getting it at dinner, it's been under a warming lamp for a while.
Andy, if you can't already tell, I'm pretty interested in your food knowledge and your barbecue
I would
background.
talk about this more than I would talk about college football. I'm more passionate about this than football.
All right, one more question about food then. What is your go-to barbecue side?
Mac and cheese. I'm a big mac and cheese guy. No, I will say I like when somebody's got a good veggie. Like I love if you've got good green beans, good collard greens. The smoked jalapenos are always fun, especially if they wrap them in bacon. But yeah, it's either mac and cheese or collard greens, depending on the mood. Like I've been counting calories for the last year and a half. I've lost 60 pounds since 2020. So like if I go to a barbecue place, a lot of times now it's just going to be meat and collard greens because that's pretty carb free, and you're getting a lot more bang for your buck there.
Good for you, Andy. I gotta go mac and cheese. I love carbs. I wish I didn't.
Well,
Wish
the,
I
the
didn't.
the guy who introduced us would be very disappointed if I was talking about eating a bunch of carbs. It's he's a trainer at a gym that I go to, and he kicks my butt on the regular, and I can't be eating junk if I'm doing his workouts.
Yeah, Dan is a good friend of mine. He's a great guy. Noom was awesome. I might have to check it out.
Oh, it's a commitment. You just have to you got to get get locked in and you're ready to go. But that's you will see me or my kids there because they're the ones who dragged me there in the first place. So
Good for you. That's good though. All right, let's move into college football. A lot went down this past weekend, aside from Georgia giving the Gators a beatdown. Brian Harsin got fired. Tennessee dominated Kentucky. Wake Forest and Oklahoma State playoff dreams are over. What was your biggest takeaway?
I just can't wait for this doubleheader in the SEC this weekend. This is the most excited I've been about a pair of SEC football games because we keep talking about Tennessee, Georgia, and it's going to be amazing. I mean, this is one of those game of the century type games, especially because everybody's been waiting for Tennessee to get good again, and Tennessee's already beaten Alabama, so we know they can play on that level. And it doesn't feel like, oh, they've had a cute season, but Georgia's going to beat them by 35. That doesn't feel it. It feels like it's going to be a pretty even game. But then you roll right into Alabama at LSU. And I've covered enough Alabama LSU games to know, especially in Baton Rouge, it doesn't matter what kind of season LSU's having. They're usually pretty tough there. And this particular LSU team seems to be getting better as the weeks go. So I am really excited to see who wins. That's the East Championship game in Athens. Tennessee, Georgia is the East Championship game. And I would say that the West Championship game is probably going to be LSU, Alabama. We'll say Alabama still has to play Ole Miss, and that's next week. But the way Ole Miss is constructed, I feel like Alabama probably a worse matchup for Ole Miss. LSU is a tougher matchup for Alabama. And so that's where I think we may watch that Tennessee Georgia game and be like, whoa, that was crazy, wild. And then we're like, oh man, the crazy thing didn't happen till later.
It's going to be good. This is the best part of football season here in November. I've been most surprised with Tennessee and Hendon Hooker this season. Do you see more than one SEC team getting into the playoffs? It's happened before. You think it'll happen this year?
I do think it's a possibility this year. There's a few scenarios that would work. You could have Tennessee beat Georgia on Saturday, and then Alabama win out, and then Alabama beat Tennessee in a close game in the SEC championship game, and they both go. That would be a possibility. That's similar to the situation where Clemson and Notre Dame both went in 2020 when Notre Dame was playing the ACC schedule. Notre Dame beats Clemson in South Bend. Clemson comes back and beats them in the ACC championship game, and they both make it. So that's a possibility. And the other possibility that I would say is if Georgia wins close against Tennessee and they both just keep on winning, then Tennessee sitting at 11-1, not playing the SEC championship game. If Georgia then goes and beats Alabama or LSU or Ole Miss or whoever they see in Atlanta, then I could see both of them making it too. The one possibility that I keep thinking about, and I don't think this is going to happen, but there is a path to it, is you have two SEC teams and two Big Ten teams. It may be that we feel like Ohio State and Michigan State are two of the best four teams by the end of this season, even though they play each other. And because that doesn't bother us about Georgia and Tennessee. It doesn't bother us about Tennessee and Alabama. It shouldn't bother us about the Big Ten teams either. I'm very curious because Michigan has been better than I thought they'd be after losing Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo. I thought that defense might take a little step back, but it's been good, and the offense has been even better than it was last season. Ohio State's defense is much better than it was last season. So, I'm expecting an epic Michigan-Ohio State game in Columbus, but it may be that when all the dust settles, because, I don't know that TCU can stay undefeated because the schedule they have ahead of them is very tough. And then Oregon, if they're sitting there at 11 or 12-1 and they're the Pac-12 champ, people are going to be like, well, yeah, but you got slaughtered by Georgia. So Clemson, they're undefeated. But the more I look at what's left of I look at what's left of their schedule after they beat Syracuse, and I'm like, oh, they're going to be fine. They're totally going undefeated. But then I'm like, individually, they can beat Notre Dame and Syracuse and South Carolina. And if they play North Carolina in the ACC championship game, but are they going to beat them all in a row? This is not a perfect team. So you could see a situation where everybody kind of falls off and you're sitting there at the end and you're going, shoot, Ohio State and Michigan both deserve to be in there.
It could happen. Crazier things have happened. Who do you think is going to win it all? I know it's early still, but who have you been most impressed with?
I am so glad that I do not feel like I have an answer to that right now, because I feel like most years I do know. Like last year, I was like, oh, it's going to be Georgia. And then 2019, it's LSU. And 2020 was definitely going to be Alabama. But this year, I don't feel that way. I feel like Ohio State Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Michigan, they all feel like they're kind of in the same bucket. Like if they played round robin, I don't know who would win each game. And that is really, really fun. I think that makes the sport much more interesting than, oh, here's this team that's just going to kick the crap out of everybody at the end.
It's been a weird football season, and I'm glad because you're right. This is the first season I don't feel like, all right, Alabama's taking it again or
Mm-hmm.
Clemson.
Yes.
It's gonna be fun. Let's switch gears a little bit and touch on Auburn, Brian Harsin getting fired. Do you think there's a front runner for this head coaching vacancy?
I think the obvious choice is Lane Kiffin, because you look at how badly they need to flip the roster, and he's so good in the transfer portal, and he does have experience recruiting in the SEC. But if I'm Lane Kiffin, I'm looking at that and going, so I can win just about as many games at Ole Miss, and I don't have to deal with nearly the amount of crap that the Auburn coach has to deal with. And Ole Miss probably going to give me another $1 million a year if I decide to stay. So if I'm him, that's a tough decision to leave. Now, the only reason you might do that is if you say, okay, Auburn's NIL situation is going to be better than Ole Miss's. They're going to be able to have money to spend on that stuff. That changes the math a little bit in recruiting. So maybe that's enough. But I really think Auburn should look at Dion. I don't think they will, and I don't think they'd hire him. But I really think he would be really interesting there, because he would be completely unafraid of recruiting against Nick Saban, recruiting against Kirby Smart. And really it comes down to what kind of staff you hire at that point. But if you look at him in Jackson State, he's hired a very good staff. It's not just that they have better players than everybody they play against now. They have really good coaches, and that's why they're kicking the crap out of everybody. A couple other names that I would pay attention to. Jeff Grimes is the offensive coordinator at Baylor. He's been at Auburn before. He's been at LSU as the offensive line coach. He runs an offense that I think would work very well in the SEC. He's not afraid to recruit in there. He's one that I think all the parties at Auburn could come to an agreement on. Del McGee at Georgia is another one. He's an assistant. This might be too big of a first, just same with Grimes, might be too big of a first job for somebody who hasn't been a head coach before. But Del McGee got his start in college at Auburn as an analyst under Gus Malzahn. He was a great high school coach in Columbus, Georgia, which, if you know where Columbus is geographically, that's right on the Georgia-Alabama line. Lots of players that are recruited by Georgia at Auburn and Alabama. So you know how that all works. And I think that really matters in this job. I think you could go out and try to get a Matt Rule, who's sitting there after getting fired by the Panthers. I'm not sure he wants to be part of recruiting at an elite level in the SEC, because that's essentially its own full-time job. And you just have to accept that as a way of life. And I'm not sure everybody wants to do that. And it's fine. You just need to know that, because that's what got them in trouble this time, is Brian Harsin was not equipped to do that and not prepared to do that. And I don't know if he realized what recruiting is like as the Auburn head coach. And by the time somebody told him, or he actually listened to the people who were trying to tell him, it was way too late to go back. So those are a few names I would think of just off the top of my head. Another one is Bill Clark, who was the UAB head coach. He's the one who was there when they tried to kill the program. He brought it back. He's an ex-Alabama high school coach. So again, someone who's not afraid of Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. I know I keep harping on that, but that is the key thing they got to worry about. This is why when the job was open last time, when they fired Gus Malzahn, they talked to Billy Napier and they talked to Brent Venables, because those were two people that you knew could go recruit against those people. That's why Florida hired Billy Napier. That's why Oklahoma hired Brent Venables. But in both those cases, those guys were like, I don't really know who's in charge at Auburn, so it doesn't feel like the safest job to take. I think in this case, with Auburn having a new president who Chris Roberts seems to be pretty adamant about, like, hey, look, I'm going to make the decisions. The last guy was content to kind of pawn everything off on the AD, but this guy's like, I'm making the big decisions here. I think that may help draw a little bit different class of candidate this time.
I've heard a lot of names thrown around. Hugh Freeze. Someone even
Oh,
had.
I forgot to mention Hugh. I'm glad you mentioned that. Hugh could win there. I think the baggage is too much. I don't know that you could convince everybody at Auburn to be on board.
Yeah, another name with a lot of baggage that someone had on their list was Urban Meyer. I don't think that will ever happen.
I cannot see that. I just can't. I'm not sure he fits very well in this era of college football because the same reasons he got bounced from the NFL very quickly, he would run into in college football now. Where, because remember before, a lot of his motivational techniques were, well, I send you home on the next train or whatever, however you want to say it. Like that doesn't work anymore because now the players can be like, Coach, I had 80 scholarship offers coming out of school. Like, I'm just going to transfer here and beat your ass.
Yeah, I can't imagine him in the SEC right now, and I don't think I'd want to with all the drama. Let's move on and talk some Florida Gator football. You're an alum, you spent time there, you know this fan base. They expect to win, as they should. This
Yep.
season has not gone the way a lot of people expected or wanted it to for Gator fans. It's been rough. What are your thoughts on the current state of this Florida football program?
Well, I think Billy Napier does understand the job he's taken now. And I do think Billy Napier's been doing all the things he's supposed to do to get them where they need to be. The question is can he actually successfully achieve those things? Because it's really about recruiting. The Georgia game last year, which exposed Dan Mullen, and then the way he kind of handled some questions after that, that was the end of Dan. It also sort of gave Scott Strickland, the athletic director, an idea of, okay, who's the type of person I want to hire? And that type of person is somebody who wakes up every day thinking, I got to beat Kirby Smart in recruiting. And so Billy Napier's doing this, and he's getting some guys that would have considered Alabama or Georgia. He's beaten those schools out for players. Cormani McClain Cormani McClain's a decent example of a guy who thought, okay, that's one that Florida's got. Well, he goes to Miami, and everyone's like, oh, it's NIL. It doesn't matter. Like, there are no rules anymore. They didn't break any rules. They got him. If you didn't like that, you do more than they did. And it's interesting because Mario Cristobal being at Miami, he was hired for the same reason at Miami that Billy Napier was hired at Florida. So that just makes it even more difficult because not only did you have to come into Florida and say, I got to beat out Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, but now you got to beat out Mario Cristobal, who is an elite recruiter as well. So it's a very tough job. Now, I look at the Brenton Cox thing this week, and that tells me, okay, this is Billy trying to say, I'm going to be here. We're going to do things my way. If you don't like that, you can leave. This leads me to believe that there's going to be a big flipping of the roster. And I was a little surprised he didn't do that immediately when he got in. But I think he wanted to be a little more methodical about it. Didn't want to just throw people out and say, I didn't give you a fair shake. He's given everybody a fair shake now. I would expect a massive overturn of the roster this year. And really what he does in the portal, I think, will determine whether he's going to be successful at Florida or not, because he needs to bring in a team that can be competitive next year. You're able to do that now in college football. Before, that's a 2-3 year rebuild. It's not now. You look at what happened at Tennessee. I mean, they didn't really even do that much out of the portal. A lot of that was guys they already had. So if you're going to make excuses like Dan didn't leave me any talent or anything like that, you can't do that. It doesn't work anymore. Those excuses don't hold water. So, and I think Billy understands that. I think he understands his job's to win the national title. Anything less is considered a failure. Is that fair? Absolutely not. But that's the same job at Auburn. It's the same job at Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee. It's not fair, but that's as Don Draper says, that's what the money's for.
College football isn't fair anymore. I think
right.
If Florida is still in this boat this time next year, that's when people are going to start talking a lot more than they are now.
Yeah, they'll get fed up, but Florida fans are a fickle bunch anyway. They always have been. And a lot of it's just being spoiled. I mean, so I grew up a South Carolina fan, but we were in the state of Florida as I was growing up, and Steve Spurrier got to Florida. I think I would have been in 7th grade when Steve Spurrier started at Florida. And so I watched as he built that up, and, he had Bobby Bowden at Florida State, and Miami was rolling. And I think most Florida fans under 50 are so used to that success. And there was so much success compressed in one amount of time. If you think about it, 1990, when Spurrier got to Florida, to 2008, when Urban Meyer won that second national title, that's 18 years. That is where most of Florida's football success is located. But the program has been playing football for 116 years now. So only 18 out of 116 have been what most people in their minds think of as Florida football. So it's not as easy a job as people think. It may just be that there were 2 Hall of Fame coaches.
I agree. I grew up watching Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin, all those guys, and that led me to have the expectations I do have today, and a lot of other people have. It'll be interesting to see how things play out and how quickly they're going to turn around, because I do truly believe Napier is a good coach and things will turn around, but it's going to take time. All right, Andy, I've kept you long enough. I appreciate you joining the podcast and sharing all your college football knowledge and barbecue knowledge. It was a lot of fun.
Well, anytime you have a question, food related, if you got to go travel for work, you let me know. I got a whole list of places in every town. So, and they're not, some of them are holes in the wall. Some of them are a little bit more expensive, but they're all good.
Moving on, now we are going to talk about a completely different subject. And honestly, it's one that might be a bit triggering and hit close to home for some people. So if you're one of those people, don't feel like listening, go ahead, wrap it up, hit exit, stop this episode of Trash the Game Plan. But I do encourage all of you to keep listening, because what I'm going to talk about affects a lot of people. It could very well be affecting someone in your own life right now. Hey, that someone might be you. And I want you to know you're not alone. So today we are going to chat about eating disorders. Nope, it's not a fun conversation, but it's an important one. And it's a part of the reason I am the person I am today. So, eating disorders. That's right. I had one in high school. It wasn't until recently, the past few years, that I think I actually accepted the fact and admitted the fact that I had an eating disorder. In high school, let me give you some perspective. Right now, I am a solid 15 pounds heavier than I was in high school. And no, it wasn't because of the freshman 15. It was because I wasn't eating. I was starving myself. I remember sitting in the cafeteria at Collins Hill High School. You guys know those pre-made salads you can buy at the grocery store? Yeah, my parents bought them because they thought I liked them and they thought I ate them at lunch. I didn't. I wasted them. I threw them away. That's makes me mad to say out loud. That was my parents' hard-earned money. But I would sit there at lunch and I would literally pick out the chicken, the croutons, and the cheese. I would squirt a little dressing on the lettuce, and I would eat a bowl of lettuce and a bottle of water for lunch. So basically, I ate water because that's what lettuce is. Again, that makes me mad to say out loud, because right now I would be like, that is a terrible lunch. There is no protein, there's no fat, and there's no carbs. But that's not the way I thought in high school, just to show you how much I've changed since then. Thank God. I would starve myself because I thought if I were skinnier, I would be happier. I thought the less I weighed, the better off I'd be. I thought that if I weighed less, I would look like the girl I sat next to in third period or the homecoming queen. It doesn't work like that, guys. It doesn't. But I was one of those girls with all the body image issues that we stereotype high school girls to have. That was me. It's real. I would look in the mirror and I wouldn't be happy with what I saw. And it wasn't just the casual not happy with what you see, because trust me, I still have days like that. Every time I look in the mirror, there's something I want to change. Like, I don't know, but there's always something. Girls are like that, guys. But in high school, it was really bad. There wasn't one thing I was happy with. I always thought I needed to be skinnier. So I stopped eating, started cutting back till the point I literally couldn't cut anything else out. I would eat a pretty normal, I think, dinner at home. I just wouldn't really eat breakfast or lunch. I don't think my parents knew that I had a problem until middle of my junior year in high school, when it got really bad, that they took me to the doctor and they wanted to have a bunch of blood work done to see if there was something wrong with me, to see if I had some sort of disease or autoimmune disorder that was causing me to lose weight, because that's the point when it became extremely noticeable. I look back at pictures and I am disgusted. I was so skinny. I looked like a twig and you could probably break my arm in half. It was that skinny. Blood work comes back and we realized there's nothing wrong. Her blood work is fine. So I think that's when my parents realized their daughter had an eating disorder. And I'm going to try not to cry, guys. It wasn't until then that I decided to start eating again because I saw what it was doing to my parents. I saw how upset they were and how devastated their daughter was. Eating disorders are a form of self-harm. Yeah, you're harming your body physically and mentally. I'm not a parent, so I don't really know what that must have been like or how hard that was on them to see their daughter like that. They were probably thinking it was their fault, but it wasn't. I was provided for very well. I'm very fortunate to have the family that I do and the parents that I do. I just chose not to eat. I chose to hurt myself because of what was going on in my head, because of the thoughts that I was battling, and because I thought that if I looked a certain way, things would be different. And that's not the case. That makes me very sad to say, but it's important to be said because I know I wasn't alone, and I know there are girls and guys can have eating disorders too, out there that are probably struggling with the same exact thing. So, I started eating again at the end of junior year when I saw what it was doing to my parents. And I began to put on some weight, which was a good thing because then everyone was like, okay, there's really not something wrong with her. She can gain weight. Entered college at a healthy weight and have kept up with it. Thank God. And let me tell you guys, cake, cheeseburgers, pizza, it is absolutely delicious. And I have become a huge foodie because I let myself. Am I saying this to say I'm perfect? No, because I'm not. My diet could be a lot better, like I'm sure a lot of other people's could be. But I'm telling you guys all of this to say you never know what the person next door is going through. You never know what the person in front of you at the grocery store in line to check out is going through. I encourage you to just share a smile, share some kind words because you never know what that could do for someone. That small gesture, that could change their whole day. Hey, it could even change their life. They may go eat a cheeseburger afterward, and they might really need that cheeseburger. So, I'm working on it too, but I encourage you guys to just try and be a nicer human being. You just never know what's going on. Also, I say all of this to say there are people out there that don't believe eating disorders are real, that they don't believe mental health problems are real, which that is completely false. Trust me, because I've gone through both. And the only reason I had an eating disorder was because of what was going on in mentally. People don't just have eating disorders to have fun because they're not fun. They have them because there's something deeper going on in their head. So just keep that in mind and try to be a more kind person. And if any of you are struggling right now or have struggled in the past and just want to chat, feel free to reach out because I'm always open and willing to chat. I don't even think that I've had this conversation with my own best friends before or my immediate family, but it sure does feel good to be honest. Thanks for tuning in to episode 6. I'll see you guys next week.